His co-author, right, his spirit author, Humberto de Campos, was a politician, a writer, died at a very young age of 48 due to complications with a visual disorder and treatment that he went through as a result of that. He was very much loved, and his works are still popular today. I think I have pictures of them as well. That's Chico, right? He died physically in 2002. His home, is it Uberaba? Is that correct? Uberaba. Humberto, also known as Brother X, was a Brazilian journalist, as I said, and Chico had several pieces of literature that was brought to him by Humberto. Here is a picture of Chico psychographing as a younger man. Has anybody been here? I had the opportunity to visit his house when I was visiting some family and some friends in Recife. We made the drive. That's Chico's bedroom, or that was his bedroom. Very quaint, humble house, and the most humble room in the house was his. I think the only vice that man had was his hat collection. He had lots of hats. But this is where he slept. This is where he lived. Very simple, very humble, and his life was truly a life of service to others. And there's Mr. de Campos towards the end of his life. So, the good news, the structure of the book is again, very, very simple. It's that thick. It's 30 chapters. There may be 3 to 4, maybe 5 pages long, if that, but very short chapters. And each of these chapters is a reflection from scenes of the gospel. And we'll talk about some of those tonight. But everything from his early days with John the Baptist is like the first chapter, all the way to the end with the crucifixion and Mary, his mother. Thoughts from her or stories about her. It just covers pretty much the whole lifespan, except for the childhood. It doesn't go into that, but the early interaction with John the Baptist is talked about initially. The main vignettes of these chapters really fall around these 4 categories, right? Spiritual lessons, humility, right? Charity, forgiveness, and reincarnation. When you think of the first 3, for sure, if you asked anybody who's the epitome or what is the best example of those first 3, I don't think anybody would be surprised that most of us would say Christ, right? He taught that, he lived that. Not everyone associates reincarnation with Christ. We do talk about it here, obviously. There are different sections in the gospel that speak to that. That's another lecture. But definitely, it's definitely associated with Christ for sure. There's many chapters in this book that talk about the marginalized, right? The people that are lesser in spirit or socioeconomically or health-wise. One of the main ones that sticks out to me is chapter 6 about the leper. So the man with leprosy who's rejected by everyone, right? They see him coming and they run. They're scared. Overwhelmed this man is with loneliness. He approaches Jesus, and Jesus responds very compassionately, much to the crowd's horror, right? The crowd like, can't believe this, right? But Christ steps forward, embraces the man, and instead of recoiling, right, just gives him a big hug, and he offers healing, not just for the body, but to give this man back his dignity, his soul, right? This man now feels the love of Christ. Jesus heals him, and he lives again, if you will. He comes back to that life that we're all promised. At the time, obviously, this really shook social norms. It was not looked well upon by the religious leaders of the time, obviously. But it really demonstrated the depth of Christ's love and how no one is out of his reach. No one is out of the realm of his healing and his helping. Chapter 12, the woman at Simon's house, is another example of Jesus' acceptance of all. The story goes, right, that at Simon's house, there's been a meal hosted. There's a Pharisee there, a religious leader, politician at the time, and a sinful woman enters the house. This woman was looked down upon for the way she lived, her actions, what have you. But she approaches Jesus in a very loving way. She's weeping. She washes his feet with her tears. And everyone in the room is kind of shocked. She even dried her tears on his feet with her hair, right? Just a very loving act. She anoints his feet with perfume, it says, and the guests are said to have been scandalized by her presence, like she shouldn't be there. Jesus, recognizing her sincerity and her purity of intent, simply embraces her, does not condemn her past, but honors her expression of love. And this speaks, I think, to all of us. How many of us have been in situations in this life that when we think about them, we're not necessarily proud of, right? They weren't our best moments, or we're so glad we're not like that anymore. Just think about a low point in your life. Not for too long. I don't want to bring you down, right? But no matter where we've been, no matter how low we get, Christ's love and forgiveness is always there for us. And we should also embrace that and be forgiving and compassionate towards ourselves is what that chapter really meant to me, what I took away from it. The other one that ties in heavily to this is, I got to change the slide. I'm sorry, guys. Is this a new screen? It is, right? It's split, so there's two slides in front of me. I'm getting dizzy. Sorry. If I think it comes out of my mouth, I apologize. I don't have to tell you everything, right? I'm sorry. But thank you for listening to my frustration. The themes of forgiveness and compassion are far and wide throughout the gospel. One of the big ones that most of us hear as a kid and continue to understand as we grow and we share with our children is how Peter was told at the Last Supper, right? Essentially that, hey, before the rooster crows, or crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. And Peter says, no way, Father. There's no way, Master, that's going to happen. So what happens? The night progresses, right? He denies him not once, but twice. And sure enough, right after he denies him the 3rd time, the rooster crows. And Peter's just crushed, right, with the weight of his failure, right? Nearly crushed with nothing left. He's just so distraught. And around that time, Peter and Christ make contact visually again, right? And instead of responding with condemnation and I told you so, I knew you were going to do it. How could you do that? But I knew it. You just couldn't do it, right? That's not what Christ did, right? He meets Peter with deep compassion. And in a quiet and intimate moment, Jesus offers him forgiveness, right? There's people that may do us wrong, right? Can we forgive them? Have we forgiven them? Have we forgiven ourselves for things that we've done wrong? So here again, in this chapter 23, after the denial, it really speaks to forgiveness and how it can transform lives. We each have the ability to transform lives. Everyone here has been transgressed or wronged in some way at some point in their life by others. We have the power, the gift of forgiveness and compassion towards those that have done us wrong. In fact, we're taught that, right? That's one of the Christ's major themes is forgiveness. Not just once, not just 7 times, but 7 times 77, right? So that's a symbolic message. To forgive is to understand the soul struggle on the path to the light. Making sense so far? I have 3 hours, yeah? No, 3.5. Okay, good. As we continue here, there's lessons from the apostles throughout this book, individual apostles, obviously. Chapter 30 talks about doubting Thomas. You've heard of him, I'm sure. Thomas had a really hard time believing that what the other apostles that had seen Christ after the crucifixion, after the resurrection, had trouble believing that this really happened. He hadn't seen him with his own eyes. And he basically said, I don't believe this. I've got to see this, and I've got to touch Jesus' wounds myself to believe. And lo and behold, Jesus appears to Thomas, not with a rebuking type attitude or, look, it's true. No, he offers him a chance to see and feel the wounds and that he's really there. And the way I looked at this, and this is my thoughts on this, not necessarily from the gospel or from the book. What's the best way to help people grow and to learn and to evolve? Ask them questions, right? Questions build relationships. Relationships build intimacy. Intimacy builds trust. And that's what basically Christ taught us here, I think, is he wasn't upset at Thomas for doubting. He wasn't upset at Thomas for needing to touch and see. He honored his curiosity. He honored his question, and he provided what Thomas needed. And I think we all have that ability. I think this is a common theme throughout the good news for me, is we are all capable of emulating Christ, right? I think we'll talk more about this in a bit, but I think that's one of our missions as an eternal spirit, life after life, slowly, painfully at times, progressing and evolving to be more tied to that Christ-like perfection as opposed to the material passions and the material vices that pull on me so much as a human being right now, right? I think that's one of the main themes, is that we all have the chance. Christ came to show us the way, right? To give us the example of how to live. And in this instance with Thomas, he's definitely teaching us that faith isn't forced, right? I think that's one of the reasons a lot of us find ourselves at a spiritual center. I can remember growing up, and I didn't understand what they wanted me to understand. And people tell you just have to have faith. I said, well, it doesn't make sense. And you couldn't feel anything because it didn't make sense either. And in this example of this chapter, it's obvious that faith isn't forced. It grows through grace and experience and love. And doubt from others, if it's met with patience and guidance, it can lead to a much deeper conviction, which Thomas definitely had after that experience. Make sense? Awesome. Chapter 32, we all know this story. There's a couple books in the lobby or the library too about Saul. Remember him? What Saul used to do? He used to kill Christians. He used to persecute them. He chased them down, hunted them down, and killed them. Right? He's on his way to Damascus one day, and he's struck with the vision. Christ comes to him. He wanders blind for some time, and at some point, he's now Paul, right? Paul the apostle, right? Paul the doer of good. Paul the savior of not the savior, but the deliverer of the good news, right? Takes on the struggle and continues until his death years later. So he goes from being a persecutor to a man of faith, a man of true belief, and sharing the good news as he's reborn as Paul. I think that this chapter, in addition to the story that we all know, I think this chapter really highlights his inner struggle, right? We all have an inner struggle. Paul's obviously is extreme, right? Saul to Paul, his past, his conversion, if you will, really, really deep internal struggle. He's fighting with himself in this chapter, like, how can I make this switch, right? But look at this. How could I have been like that and now I'm like this? The point is, when I think of myself or think of yourself, the man I am today is different than the man I was a decade ago, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago. My daughter is a junior in high school, and she just had one of her, it was a National Honor Society banquet, right? And I'm sitting there, a man of 58 years old, all right, watching my daughter and her friends with my wife, flashing back to me in that situation when I was 17, 18 years old. Man, this is going to sound cocky, but I've come a long way. I would not want to go back to that cocky kid at 17 that thought he knew everything and, tried to prove it, right, at every chance he got. So the point is, we all have the opportunity to go through this inner transformation. And what better way to truly grow than to follow the example of Christ? And that's what this chapter reminded me of. So I hope you get a chance to read it. His intense zeal that originally was directed towards doing bad, right? Even though he thought he was right at the time, he was fighting for what he thought was right. That zeal, that same zeal and passion that he had before he became Paul, just transferred to a beautiful mission in serving Christ. We all have that ability to transform. And I think the even bigger takeaway for this is it truly shows that none of us are above redemption. None of us. There's a place called, the Other Side Academy, I think it's called. Anyways, I was just there. I was at a meeting in so much for my memory, huh? Long story short, without a lot of details, this place is, think about a house filled with ex-cons, substance abusers, criminals, just you name it, right? And this Other Side Academy was formed to help these people. If you're there, you were either going to go to jail for life, or the judge had mercy on you and sent you to the Other Side Academy. They don't turn anybody away. If you show up, there's a bench in the lobby. If you sit down at that bench, they come talk to you and they help you. Or you can ask to go there by a judge. The story of this is these people, some of them have been there 20 years, right? The guy that runs it now, it's kind of funny. His vehicle, his Jeep, you know how cars have got, pinstripes or different decor on them. His car says ex-con in part of his pinstripe. The point is, he now runs this place. He's been involved with them. He was only supposed to be there for 2 years. He stayed for 8 or 9, and then they asked him to go open the second location. No one there is above redemption or beyond redemption, and we all have that ability. Am I beating a dead horse? Stop. Yeah, makes sense. All right, good. The other point about this is, I think that it tells us that Jesus doesn't only see our actions, but the potential within our souls. We were all created for perfection, right? Not immediately, right? We start very simple and we progress over time, but we were all created to evolve. And that story of Paul to Saul to Paul is a great example of that. The other several chapters in this book talk about the different parables, right? We've all heard a lot of these parables. The Bible, the good news especially, is full of parables. Jesus taught in parables, as the story goes, because the people of the time just weren't necessarily ready for all the facts, right? Just as we're not ready to know everything, right? It comes to us as we're prepared for it, as we're ready for it. And Christ spoke in parables, taught in parables, so that the people of the time could understand. Everyone knows probably the story of the prodigal son. It really speaks to mercy, if you will, I think. As you know, the prodigal son symbolizes, it's about a boy, a son, that leaves. He gets his inheritance. The father gives it to him. He takes off to see the world and to build his own empire, whatever it might be. Many years later, he returns, much to the chagrin of the brother who stayed and worked and helped. But the father welcomes him back with open arms, much to the negative reception of the other son, or the brother. I think the the Son symbolizes any one of us, any soul that distanced itself from God, right? From divine guidance, right? I can't speak for you guys, but there's definitely been times in my life when I drifted away, right? Earlier in life, especially, didn't have much faith. I was searching for anything to believe in, and eventually I pulled it together. But my point is, this Son in this story really speaks to any of us that distances ourselves from God. Additionally, I think the Father in this story represents God's unconditional love. There's nothing that we can't be forgiven for. There's nothing that we can't redeem ourselves for through our actions and through our effort. God's that loving Father that will always have his hands out for us to hug us and to welcome us back. I think the brother who was so upset when the brother came back, right? The one that stayed, right? I think that symbolism really illustrates spiritual pride. Jealousy. Yeah, that's right. Man, you ruined it. You know? Yeah, jealousy. Spiritual pride. Ego. You guys know what that stands for? I've shared this with you before? EGO. Edging God out, right? So when we're full of ego and pride, I think that's what the brother represents there, that spiritual pride. I mean, he followed all the rules, but he had no compassion, all right, for the others' downfall or their redemption. Again, a great lesson for all of us, right? All of us could learn from that. True spiritual growth requires more than just discipline, is another takeaway from this chapter. It requires love, right? Love and discipline. I think that's good for that. I think one more thing that we could say about this chapter is the kid that left, right, and had to come back, kind of in disgrace, right? He had to suffer so much, right, to just get the courage and the strength probably to come back to his father, right? We grow through suffering. Suffering helps us to grow, and we should never forget that. As hard as life gets, as much as life can beat us up, that suffering will help us grow. So I think that's another takeaway from that chapter. The Good Samaritan, we've all heard of that story, right? A person is going down the road, gets mugged, gets beat up, he's left to die. They took all of his belongings. A Pharisee walks by, a Levite walks by. These are religious leaders, politicians, people of the upper class, if you will, the respected folk of the time. Walk by. One guy crosses the road, the other guy just scoots on by because he doesn't want anything to do with it. The third guy, a Samaritan, right, the lower echelon of people at the time, right, stops. And what does he do, right? He dresses his wounds, he caresses him, he picks them up, he puts him on his donkey, I think, takes him to an inn, helps him recover, leaves money with the innkeeper. Hey, listen, I'll be back this way at some point. If there's any money owed, I will pay you on my return. Total stranger, and someone that most people frown upon, right, helped this total stranger. There's a lot of good messages there. I think the wounded traveler represents the human soul in a lot of ways, right? We can get beat up, we can get crushed, we can feel defeated, but Christ's love and the love of those that follow that example are there to pick us up. We don't have to do it all by ourselves. You know what I mean? There's help. We have to let ourselves receive it. I think it also speaks to like the Levite, right? The priest that just walked on by. I think it really speaks to knowledge is good, knowledge is important, but when it lacks compassion, when it lacks love, what is it really? Right? You could be the smartest guy in the room, which I never am. It's usually Peter, right? if you don't have that compassion or that love or that kindness for others, what's it all about? Make sense? All right. I also think that the Samaritan that was walking by, is another way to look at this is what we attempt to do here, what we talk about in Spiritism, true charity, right? Asking nothing in return, giving for the sake of giving, helping without bias. Everyone should be helped, right? Or without hesitation. The inn itself, I think, represents support systems. I talked about that a little bit already. We all have the ability. I shouldn't say we all have support systems, but remember, God's provided everything we need, right? Not everything we want, but if we connect, if we talk to our guardian angel, our protector spirits, and we really focus our energy to receive what we need, the support system is there, right? Just here alone, you got Monday night lectures, you've got Tuesday night classes, you've got Wednesday night counseling, right? You've got this talk on Thursday. What do we do on Fridays?
Relax.
Eat pizza. That's right. Nothing on Fridays. You're on your own, but you can call us. We'll be there for you. So we all have that ability, right, to create these, to tie into these support systems. The next category that I really liked was the role of suffering, right? The cross, right? The chapter, that's actually the wrong number. There's only 30 chapters, so don't look for chapter 40. It's not there. I do believe that's chapter 29 or 30. It's towards the end of the book. It really speaks to embracing suffering. How many of you ever been really sick in your life? A couple of you, right? Did you thank God for it? Not everybody does, right? Christ is there, right? On the cross. Embracing the suffering, forgiving his persecutors, his murderers. And this chapter really, really dives into that. When you think of crucifixion, right, what do you think of? It's defeat, right? The man's being put to death, being killed, being tortured, persecuted for his beliefs and his actions, right? So that cross itself, I think, symbolizes to most of us, not us, but the thought of defeat. But when we really examine this, it's not defeat. It's actually the highest expression of love and sacrifice that you can think of. Spiritual triumph, if you will. Christ, and the interpretations on this are all over the place, depending on what religion you are, what beliefs you are, what have you. But ultimately, regardless of your belief on this, I think it's fair to say, and I don't say this a lot. I've always said and preached, if you will, that Christ didn't die for me, but he lived for me, right? He lived to show me the way. But reading this chapter changed my view on that. I can honestly say I think Christ did die for me, right? His dying, his suffering, and the way he embraced that taught me, has the ability to teach all of us how to embrace suffering, how to embrace challenges and different. And I'm not encouraging you guys to go out and get nailed, right? Or hurt. But as things come our way and we suffer, if we can take that same outlook to suffering like Christ taught us on the cross, there's going to be a lot of growth for us in times of difficulty. My wife, as some of you know, had cancer in one of her eyes. It's gone. She's well, but I couldn't do it. She was thankful for her cancer. She thanked God for her cancer. And you hear more and more stories like this. I can stand up here and talk to you and it sounds like I know what I'm talking about. I don't know if I could do that. So far, I haven't really been hit with anything major, right? I don't know if I could do that. But Christ did it, right? Other people have shown that it's possible. So I think we all have that ability. Christ didn't resist suffering, right? He embraced it with sincerity and divine purpose. He was there for a reason. He was there with purpose. He was a volunteer, right? volunteer. He could have used his immense ability to eradicate the attack, right? The actions that they were taking. He could have escaped, right? He volunteered and he did it. He was not a victim of circumstance. I think the cross in this chapter, or in the story itself, symbolizes the weight of humanity's ignorance in a lot of ways. Christ, depending again on how you look at this, there's so many different versions of this or ways to look at it. But at the end of the day, I think Christ was killed for political reasons. Right? I'm not a conspiracy theory, but think about it. Christ challenged the political hierarchy of the time. Christ challenged the socioeconomic hierarchy of the time. Everything that was the status quo, he threatened, right? And this weight of humanity's ignorance and selfishness and ties to materialism is really, I think, one of the big symbolisms there. Additionally, I think it speaks to how Jesus absorbed hatred with love, right? He turning the other cheek, how he taught us. He did not fight this end, if you will, or this transition. He refused to retaliate, right? And he forgave his persecutors, his murderers. How many of you have your own cross to bear, right? We each, in our own way, have our own cross, right? And you don't have to tell us what it is, but we all have something that we're bearing. And again, I'm not asking you to die for that, but I'm asking you to look within and see the opportunity to use the example of Christ to help get you through that challenge and to help grow through that experience. Ultimately, this chapter speaks to when you embrace your suffering with love and purpose, it can lead to massive healing and transformation. Right? Yes? We good? All right. So those are the stories from the book, the chapters that I picked out that I definitely were touched by, maybe more than some of the others. But how do we apply these to modern living? Right? We're not living in Christ's time. We're not living centuries ago. We're living in 2025. We have computers in our pocket that connect us to the world. We have instant access to more than information that we can probably ever use. We have access to every vice known to man. We have access to just nonstop stimulation, right? All of these things that tie us more to our material life than to a Christ-like life, right? So how can we apply the good news today? Well, I think it starts with who can we forgive? And again, you don't have to say it out loud, but who can you forgive tonight on your way home? Who can you call? Is it yourself, maybe? Can you stop?
Forgive yourself, cannot forgive anybody.
Fair enough.
There's no way.
It's true. It's hard, though. You ever looked in the mirror and tell yourself you love yourself? Makes me cry when I try to do it. So I'm still carrying stuff. The point is, who can you forgive today? I think we can start with ourselves. And if it's not you, who can you forgive? Who can we show compassion to? Who can we help? How can we reduce our pridefulness, reduce that ego, right? By performing charity in daily life. Who can we help today? And the symbolic message of all of these is challenges or opportunities. There's always someone we forgive. There's someone we can help. There's pride and ego that we can suppress or eliminate. And as the quote says, right, to follow the master is to carry his light into every corner of darkness. And I think if we wanted to summarize this book into 3 words, those are the 3 that I would use. Love, humility, and compassion. If you live with that always, right, pride and selfishness are just incompatible. You can't be selfish if you're being compassionate, right? They just don't go together. You can't be full of pride if you're being humble, right? They don't coexist. So that should be our goal, right? To try to live with humility, with love and compassion towards ourselves, towards the world around us, as much as possible. Because ultimately, I think what the good news is teaching us is that we're here to conquer that kingdom of heaven, which is in our souls. And I'm not suggesting that that my version of this is correct, but I'm not really a believer in a fiery pit called hell, or a devil that is trying to persecute me. I really believe that I'm my own worst enemy, my ego, my pride, and that's what I need to conquer. And the way I will conquer that efficiently and best is to embrace the example that Christ taught me through the good news, if you will. And so that's what I try to work on every day. I come up short all the time, but I'm trying. I'm a work in progress, as we all are. So I think the good news brings new light to Jesus' message. There's some quotes here. The first one comes from, I think it's chapter 1, item 7 in the Gospel according to Spiritism. The next two are paraphrased, and they show up through many different books in Spiritism. But I love this, right? Spiritism has not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it by explaining and developing it for a new era of understanding. It is the promised consoler sent to remind us of Christ's teachings and reveal their deeper meaning. The messages that have been delivered to us through the Gospel according to Spiritism, through the Spirit's book, through all the loving spirits that shared their messages with Kardec and with others, they're all there to guide us. Those are messages and instructions that people at the time when Christ walked the earth were not ready for. He spoke in parables. He promised a consoler to come. And sure enough, a couple hundred years ago, has it been 200 years yet? 100 and close? The Spirit's book is delivered to us to help explain some of this stuff. And the Gospel according to Spiritism comes to us to help clarify some of this stuff. The other quote here I liked, right? Encourages us to pursue inner transformation, Christ-like transformation. And then the Gospel is not a book of the past, but the living guide to the soul. Think about it. I don't have a gospel up here, but pretend this is the gospel. I got the playbook right here, right? The playbook's right here. Live like this. Think about Christ and the way he lived. You could be an atheist. You could be ignorant of Christ and his life. But if you described the way he walked the earth, the things he said, the things he did, the things he didn't do, right? The message that he shared, the healing, the helping, and you ask somebody who had no knowledge of this, so if you live like this, if we all live like this, you think the world would be a better place? Heck yeah, right? So it crosses every border, if you will. It's a living guide to the soul of how to live. And to wrap this up, I've got just a couple more slides. This is, I think, one of my favorite slides. Each of us created at the bottom left, right? Simple and lacking knowledge. Ignorant, if you will. The same. And this drives people nuts when I say this sometimes. You gotta be careful what you say it. Guess who was created the same way? Down in the bottom left. Long time ago. Every pure spirit known to man, right? Christ himself. Simple, lacking knowledge. And through life after life, through evolution and development, voila, pure spirit, the greatest spirit, the purest spirit to ever walk the earth. They gave us the good news. It gave us the gospel. It gave us the playbook on how to live, right? Where are we on this? Way down in that bottom third order, right? If we're living on earth, chances are we got a lot of work to do. Does that mean it's not possible? Does that mean we're not going to reach that? Absolutely not. Embrace the suffering, right? Embrace the example of Christ. We are today, right, living the very reality that we co-created, right? I'm paying the price. I'm receiving the gift of my choices lifetimes ago and 10 years ago. It's all coming together. And I like to call this, you guys probably agree, cause and effect. Everything that I'm living today is a result of my actions or my inaction in the past. There's a great story of a surgeon in one of these books I've read here, curing people with his hands, right, in this lifetime. If you go back many lifetimes, he He was a thief, and he killed people with a knife. That was his weapon of choice. Lifetimes after that, he was a great swordsman. He was a soldier, right, in the army, and he killed for his country. He killed for purpose, right? He wasn't necessarily a murderer. He was fighting for the good. And then many lifetimes later, now he's a surgeon, and his hands are for healing, right? The point is, we live the reality today. It's a consequence. It's the effect of the choices we've made. And no matter how much we fight it and we make mistakes, it is inevitable that we will grow, right? Slowly, painfully. But that's our destiny. It's going to happen. We co-create this. We dictate the speed. We dictate the length. We dictate the degree of suffering that we are going to endure. Prior to coming into this world, into this life, by the grace of God and with the help of my mentors, I made a plan. By the grace of God, I can't remember. Right? Who wants to remember all the mistakes they made, right? But I made a plan, and he put me in this life, right? I helped, right? With this circle of friends, right? Family that I didn't choose necessarily by blood, but my friend Peter, right? All of you here, right? I picked this life, right? We plan in a lot of ways: socioeconomic status, geographical location, major health conditions, major tribulations to repent or atone for mistakes we've made. And without this circle, right? Without you, right? I can't just go live on an island by myself and avoid temptation, right? That's not how I grow. It's not how you grow. We grow by the very challenge of being a communal society. We grow by the very challenge of interacting with prideful, selfish people. We grow by the very act of being egotistical and prideful ourselves, of being tied to the bank account or being tied to our status, right? We grow by that interaction, by that turmoil sometimes. In this life, we have the opportunity to amend our actions from the past, to work through some of those challenges that we didn't fix the last time. And sure enough, I'm going to die at some point in this life. I'm going to retreat, if you will, or advance to that spiritual realm. I'm going to heal. I'm going to, unfortunately, realize my shortcomings. And by the grace of God, at some point, I'm going to have a new plan and a new mission, and I'm going to come back. And before you know it, I'm going to evolve. And we all have that promise. And it's a beautiful thing. And the way this happens, I think the fastest and the least painful way is to simply follow Christ. I like to think of myself as a follower of the way. I fail regularly every day. But my mission every morning, as I sit there and I read a chapter from that book or some other spiritual devotional, is how can I try to be more like him? And again, I fail every day. I think I pissed off at least 18 people on the turnpike with the way I drive. And if you were one of them, I apologize. The point is, I fail regularly. But what I'm doing differently is I'm acknowledging that. I'm forgiving myself. I'm not judging myself. I try to spend very little time worrying about yesterday. And I try to spend very little time worrying about tomorrow. If I can just focus on this precious present moment that God has given me this day and follow his example more and more, one day becomes 2 days become 3, and before you know it, I'm living better in my 50s than I was in my 20s, my 30s, and my 40s. Does that make sense? All right. Part of me thinks I should leave it there because I felt that, but I got one more slide, and I hope I don't ruin it because I like that feeling. I have questions for you. All right. What teaching from tonight touched you the most? Does anybody want to share? Is anybody moved by one particular chapter? No? That's okay. Yes?
Growing to suffering.
Yes. Very good. It touched you?
Yes.
You can think of a way to apply it?
Yes.
That's great. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome. How can we embody the good news today when we leave? Anybody have any ideas? How can we choose to embody the good news today? I'll go back a slide. Be more like him, right? I think is the answer. And then finally, what questions might you have for me, if any? I'm essentially done. I want to thank you for your time and attention, but if you have questions, we have a minute or two. No? All right. Peter, that means I did a great job.
You did a great job.
Oh, wait a minute. There's that ego and pride again. Darn it. But no, seriously, thank you so much for your time and attention. I really appreciate the opportunity to share what I learned. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you.